Hello and welcome to Moon Memos podcast. I'm your host, Mongqing. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to share this episode with you. Recently, I was asked by a young woman about UTIs. If you know, you know. If you don't know, it stands for urinary tract infection. And I've had my share in my life. Although I'm happy to report I haven't had one in maybe more than 10 years. First, I'd like to dispel a very common myth. When I was learning more about it, both for myself and in grad school, I read that one reason why women get UTIs a lot more often than men is because of anatomy. As women, we have a much shorter urethra than men. And that's talking about the length of the tube that connects the bladder to the opening where you're okay. It's true we have a shorter urethra, but that is definitely not a reason why we get more infections. It's a really beautiful pathway and cascade of how UTIs are explained in Chinese medicine, which is that it actually starts in excess heat building up in the heart. Everything affects the heart because the heart in Chinese medicine refers to the umbrella field that oversees, controls, and is affected by everything else, the physical body being the most dense layer. So it originates when there's imbalance in the heart, usually coming from some kind of distress, builds up if it's not properly processed, like as in properly processed emotion. It builds up, it accumulates, and eventually it gets dissipated, or let me put it another way. So because the heart is so important, whatever is happening there are several different layers and pathways and structures around the heart system to protect it, to help it to maintain its balance, because it's of the utmost importance as far as functions in our bodies are concerned. Sort of like if we want to talk about Western anatomy, maintaining homeostasis, maintaining body temperature, that's the every cell's primary function, right? So in this sense, the most primary and important fundamental function of the entire system in Chinese medicine, so I guess I can call it Chinese anatomy, is that we see everything in one form or another, in one way or another, is trying to maintain the balance of the heart. So when there's an imbalance, when things start to accumulate in excess, one structure or one system that siphons that away is the small intestine. And the small intestine, so it is connected to the heart that way, and it is connected to the urinary bladder system another way, but also anatomically, organ-wise. So this is how it works. There's excess heat built up in the heart. The small intestine takes it away, thereby maintaining more of a balance in the heart. And the small intestine passes it down to the urinary bladder in order to get it out of the body, right? Get all the heat out of the body. And that is why when I have infections, it feels like the pee is so hot. It's like much hotter than body temperature, and it feels urgent and it's painful. It makes sense, doesn't it, when you think about that? What makes it feel that way is because you already have those sensations accumulated in your heart. So by the time it reaches that level, I mean, there's a lot accumulated. So the body is actually telling you at that point that, this is not good. We need to look at what's going on, why all this heat and pain and toxicity is building up. And you need to look at what's happening, what's going on in your life that's creating that. And so by taking antibiotics, which is the first thing that you get prescribed, right? If you go to a doctor, yes, that will kill the biome or the bacteria that causes the infection. However, it also destroys the entire biome, including the good stuff, right? And that's why once you start that cycle, it seldom ends. You're going to have infection after infection because that not only destroys the balance of the flora and fauna in your body, the microbiome, but it never looks at what causes it in the first place. So if you continue to live the way you do, if you continue to react to life the way you do, the way you did, well, what do you think is going to happen? The same thing. And in fact, it's more likely to recur because now that pathway and that system has been compromised. It's been weakened by the antibiotics. So now I don't want to leave you doom and gloom. If you've taken it, and I certainly have, there are many ways we can help our microbiome to come back to balance, to be healthy again, to be flourishing with the good, all the buddies we have. I think of them that way. They need us to build them back if they've been massacred. So there are many ways to do that. So don't fret. But I wanted to go into my story, so you can really see how this whole thing worked. And I'll start with that. I'm happy to report I haven't had an UTI for at least 10 years. But before that, I've had my share. I mean, grad school would be cause enough. But the last one I had that I can really remember, it quickly became pyelonephritis, which is kidney infection. And this might serve as a public service announcement. Don't let your body get there. That is not good. I survived, but yeah, I really learned my lesson, and it was hard. It was a hard one, but I really learned it, and I don't think I'll ever come close to that again. Well, here it goes. I'll tell you from the beginning. So I had just bought my house up here in the Catskills, and that summer I was pushing myself really hard to create a garden out of this land. And it was hard because there's more stones in the ground than soil. So when you dig, it's really difficult. but it's what I've always wanted. I wanted a little bit of land of my own. I love to garden. I love to plant things. And so I was pushing myself physically really hard. And then we went to visit friends. And it was in July, I remember. And it was very hot. For some reason, my friend, my host, was very excited about a new creamery in town. I didn't even know what creamery meant exactly. I mean, I know it was something to do with milk, but when we got there, I was like, oh, it's ice cream. Well, they were so enthusiastic about this that I couldn't say no when they bought me a giant ice cream cone. I'm saying giant without exaggeration. I held it with both of my hands. And I knew that it wasn't going to be a good idea to eat it all, but that's another thing I couldn't say no to, which is when food is given to me, I have a very hard time not finishing it. That's why if I were to serve myself, for example, I always take a little bit at a time because I know if I took more and I couldn't finish, I'd feel, I don't know, somehow really guilty. And I think it comes from, I don't think it comes from my life. I really feel like it comes from something older. Yeah, there's this tremendous guilt for wasting food. And I also can't say no when somebody has already bought something for me, like this ice cream cone. So I said yes, even though I knew it wasn't good for me. And I finished the whole damn thing. We go back, and that evening we have a great meal, which is again accompanied by red wine. I knew that was going to be even worse on top of the ice cream. My body actually changed completely after acupuncture and herbs when I first started grad school, but it still doesn't process alcohol all that well. And I wonder if anyone's bodies process this toxin very well, but I just yeah, it just really doesn't agree with me. And I feel it after a small amount. Before I could stop, my host, he poured a full glass of red wine. And again, I couldn't say no, so I drank it. So we left them. By the time we got back to my house, I was already feeling signs of UTI. And by this point, I actually knew how to address it. So I take this a supplement that is derived from cranberries without the sugar and whatever else that's not desirable when your body is going through an UTI. It's very effective, and I recommend everyone to have it in their house. So I started taking that, and soon enough, the symptoms started to calm down. So I should have continued, and I should have continued taking that, drink a lot of water, and definitely rest. But I didn't, because as soon as I felt better, I felt a little stronger, I went back to gardening. And I remember when I was getting up from bending down that I felt my low back hurt. And up to that point in my life, I really, really seldom felt that. Only when I pushed myself really physically hard, and I didn't do that very often. So I remember feeling that, but I ignored it. I was like, okay, it's fine. I'll just take a short break and go back tomorrow. And so by I think it was Monday when we were heading back to Brooklyn. I was in so much pain, and this time it was at a different place. It wasn't near the urethra. It was further up and deeper, and I was weak. And yeah, it was probably the most painful experience of my life, next to having my wisdom tooth removed. That is a whole other episode. Coming back to this, on the car ride down, I was literally writhing in my seat. And that's what's interesting. I observed that, pain like this is something that someone else cannot understand because it's not really visible. Like, you feel it, I mean, I knew I couldn't really sit without feeling tremendous pain. And yet my husband's driving and he couldn't really get it. Anyway, go back to the city. Um, call, I call my doctor, and I asked for an emergency appointment. And my husband asked me if I wanted him to come with me. And once again, I said no. Of course, I wanted him to come with me. But I was thinking about him more than me at that point. And it's not because I'm selfless, it's because I am selfish, in the sense that I wanted to please him. I wanted him to be more comfortable, and that would mean I wouldn't lose his love, right? I know it might sound absurd to some of you, but I'm sure some of you listening understands. It's like a really messed up way of thinking that that's the only way you get love, is by sacrificing yourself and making it very obvious that you're doing so and that you're putting others first. So there's that. I said no, he didn't have to come with me. He just drove 3 hours. And I took him myself on the subway to the doctor's. So there, she took my temperature, and then she did this test, which I learned in school, textbook, where you have an open palm, which you place over the kidney area on the back. It's a little bit higher than the low back, the waist, where the kidneys actually are. And then you lightly tap over it with the other hand, which is in a loose fist. I vividly remember learning this, and when she did it on me, the the excruciating pain from that light tap made my whole body jump. And she was visibly alarmed, and she said to me, "Okay, I really want to send you to the ER, but I'm gonna also give you a choice because you don't have a temperature. You don't have a fever. And I'm really surprised that you don't have one, because normally people have a fever when they have pyelonephritis. But because you don't have one, I'm going to give you the choice of not going to the ER, but you go downstairs and you fill this prescription for the antibiotics and you go straight home and you rest." And she said, "Because I know you probably end up waiting in the ER for hours, which is not good for you, which might worsen the whole thing. That's why I'm giving you this option. And because you have no fever, I know it's not getting worse and it's not going to be life-threatening." So, of course, I chose the option of no ER because she was right. That's how it was in the city. So that I followed the rest of her instructions and I went home. And that was my experience. It didn't end there. After the antibiotics, it took me several months to even understand that I wasn't recovering the way I expected myself to. So that's when I finally, after a few months, learned about adrenal fatigue. And again, that's going to be a different episode because that's a big topic on its own. But so I had pyelonephritis. First, it was a UTI, and before that, it was because I said no. I couldn't say no. At least 3 times in 24 hours. And they were big ones. They were not small ones. They were the major factors that contributed first to the UTI and then to pyelonephritis. So the lesson here is clearly that we women have been conditioned to not say no, to always say yes, even when our bodies are telling us the opposite. Our inner wisdom is telling us this is a really stupid thing to say yes to. All of that, and I just felt compelled to share this because until we stop doing that, our heart is going to take all the hits. 400 blows. That's what it's going to be all the time because we keep saying yes and we keep taking on more and we keep pushing ourselves more. And that's why, in my experience working with women, I have hardly ever come across someone who's had only one UTI. It's usually quite often, some of them, regularly, like every month, every other month. And they keep going back to take the antibiotics, decimating the internal climate, the internal environment. And the cycle gets worse and worse. And it's because they're not looking at the root cause. Now, the root cause for each of these women could be very similar or could be vastly different, but it doesn't matter. It's all about how they react to their circumstance, their environment. And that's something we have the power to change. We're the only ones actually who can change it. No one can tell you how you feel. No one can tell you how to process your emotions. And that's kind of the essence of it. So I wanted to tell you about quantum acupuncture. Quantum acupuncture is my proprietary method for identifying and dissolving the unconscious stories that create chronic physical pain. It's a process that allows your body to heal itself without relying on surgery or medication. In this case, I hope you see the connection by now. I'm trying to make it clear, but it took me some time, but eventually I learned to listen to my body first and my brain second. My brain was saying, you've got to say yes. You cannot say no. You shouldn't refuse. You're a good guest. You're a good wife, whatever. But my body was absolutely saying, no, no, no. And would it have mattered if I said no to any of those things? No. That's a real no. It wouldn't have mattered. My friends would not have stopped loving me. My husband would not have stopped loving me. That's just a story that I created. Maybe not created. Maybe it's a story I picked up and integrated into my subconscious. And it makes no sense to my current reality, but because it's deeply in there, it was driving my reality. Yeah, so this is why I'm passionate about working with people on how to dissolve the cause, the cause that's deep inside that may be your blind spot. So um you know that's what a blind spot is, right? You don't see it. You just can't see it because you haven't learned how to, or nobody's ever showed you or taught you. But to somebody who's a good match for you, it's very, very obvious. It's very clear. So, yeah, I feel so fortunate and grateful for having wise mentors point out my blind spots. Because once I'm aware of them, it wasn't really all that hard to dissolve them or to shift away from them. Whatever you decide to do, simply to not allow it to drive the vehicle of your life, simply not allow it to be the back motivation, like the deep motivation for reacting to life the way you have been. So, yeah, that is my story. And I think also you can see how the anatomical explanation for UTIs makes zero sense. And although to describe the inverse, you can see how easily that an untreated UTI can quickly go up to the kidney organs itself, which in both medicines, in Western and Chinese medicine, the bladder and the kidneys are closely connected. And so, yeah, if you allow that first layer to be sick, then it's going to quickly seep into the deeper layer. And it makes sense. The kidneys and the bladders are both systems associated with the element water. It all makes sense. And water, guess what? Even as simple physics, it makes sense. Water is what controls fire, right? And going way back to the beginning when I was talking about heart heat, well, another way to describe that would be fire. The element fire is what creates heat. And so the body so amazingly takes, the water that's available to cool down the heart, because the heart is what's most essential. It needs to be maintained balanced, above all else, right? So everything else in a way is like, again, trying to maintain that balance. So the body uses the water systems, the water element, to take the heat away. And if you catch it in the beginning, it's very, very possible to help the body so that it doesn't develop into a full-blown infection. Like I said before this summer, before the ice cream pyelonephritis incident, I knew how to do that. I had several twinges and I knew exactly what to do in order to help my body to heal back, right? But because I ignored the signs, and then I stopped taking care of myself before it was fully healed, that's why it went deeper and it became kidney infection. So, okay, I think that's enough iterations for you to get it really clear. But if not, as always, please let me know. Please ask questions. I love questions. They help me also make things more clear for myself and others. Yeah. I wish you a wonderful day, and thank you again for being here, listening. More will be coming. An episode about adrenal fatigue, an episode about what else? Who knows? And I plan to invite more guests to have magical conversations with. So see you next time. Bye.